San Francisco is a team that looks like a true juggernaut. Whether you look on the offense, defense, or even special teams side of the ball, they truly don't have a weakness. I mean, even their kicker, who was a question mark headed into the season, is pretty great this year. But I want to take a step back from all of these players that we often mention, like Christian McCaffrey or George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, and look at the quarterback, who's often overlooked and undervalued. For instance, every time this offseason that I talked about Brock Purdy and him truly being a franchise elite quarterback, I was met with the same exact thing. He's more like a Jimmy G type quarterback and is going to throw a boatload of interceptions and is limited. He only looks good because of the offense he's in. Well, that's not the case. Perhaps a good place to start is the stats. Jimmy Garoppolo already this year has thrown 6 interceptions. That's good for leading the league. Meanwhile, Brock Purdy still hasn't thrown 1 interception. The next common argument I often see about Brock Purdy is how he's just a dink or dunk quarterback. But so far this season, that just looks unfounded and kinda silly to argue that point. Because every time Brock Purdy's on the field, he's looking deep. Take last game for instance. He targeted Juwan Jennings later in the game when he didn't really need to throw the ball deep. But he did, because that's what the read required. That's something that Brock Purdy does well. He takes exactly what the defense gives him, and that's why San Francisco has been able to put up like 33 points per game with him at the helm. Purdy's top 10 stats don't end there though. He's also top 10 in touchdowns thrown this season, coming in tied at number 7, one behind Patrick Mahomes with 9 touchdowns thrown this season. And if you really took some of those passes where Purdy dumped it off in the backfield but it was still a throw, his touchdowns could have easily been a little bit higher. The next column Purdy also comes behind Patrick Mahomes in is pass yards thrown. He's ranked number 8 in the league currently, thrown 1,271 pass yards this year. Brock Purdy comes in second at completion percentage at 72.1%. He's number 1 in quarterback rating in the entire league. Overall, if you look at Brock Purdy right now, he looks like an MVP franchise quarterback if you don't look at his size or where he was drafted. But when you start looking at those things, then excuses start coming in. Like, well, he's on a good offense, so that's really why Brock Purdy is doing well. But Purdy is the only quarterback that has been able to consistently put up 30 points a game with this offense. Even Jimmy Garoppolo last year with Christian McCaffrey wasn't able to do it, and he was in the offense longer than Brock Purdy still has been in. Brock Purdy last game also became number 5 on the leaderboards for consecutive games with 30 plus points. That's right behind Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady once again, and Kurt Warner. One thing in common with all of those quarterbacks is they're all Hall of Fame quarterbacks. Maybe Brock Purdy at one point, but what's clear about Brock Purdy is he's definitely a franchise quarterback, and he's a key part of the San Francisco success. But this leads me to a question that I've been pondering for a while now, and that's why Brock Purdy was passed up and why he's being so successful in Shanahan's offense, where so-called more talented quarterbacks like Trey Lance weren't even able to make it on the field. To begin, we need to understand Kyle Shanahan's offense is predicated on getting the ball to players in open space, establishing the running game. But what many people often overlook is how complicated it truly is to learn. It has one of the highest motion rates across the entire league and has some of the most complex verbiage in the entire NFL. This complexity is a help, not a hindrance to Brock Purdy, as he's one of the most dedicated quarterbacks to his craft. Being the last pick in the NFL draft will often do this to you. But there's another aspect of his game that many people have overlooked, and that's his S2 cognition test. This is a measurement of how well a player sees the field and is able to dissect what the defense is doing to him. He landed in the mid-90s. You could consider that test score like Drew Brees like or even Tom Brady like. Brandon Alley, the co-founder of S2 Cognition, said that Brock Purdy will never have a hard time understanding what the opposing defense is trying to do to him. This is a big reason to me why the argument that Brock Purdy is going to be figured out doesn't make a whole lot of sense. That requires a quarterback that first doesn't understand what the defense is trying to do to him, and secondly doesn't understand how to respond to what the defense is trying to do to him. So far this entire season and last season, that's not been the case. Brock Purdy looks like he understands what type of coverage the defense is in, and he's able to get these things because of his pre-snap motions that Kyle Shanahan runs to make it easier on the quarterback. Brock Purdy is basically the perfect fit for Kyle Shanahan's offense. Going along with the concept of Brock Purdy fitting into Kyle Shanahan's offense, we also need to talk about the relationship between Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan. One of the most important things when it comes to a coach and quarterback relationship is trust. If you don't have trust in your quarterback, it's not going to be a successful season. You're not going to call plays you believe in, and you're just going to focus on your running game. And perhaps in the past, we've seen this a little bit with players like Jimmy Garoppolo and Kyle Shanahan. This isn't the case though with Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy. Last game, even Kyle Shanahan said he kind of needed to make sure he didn't just start throwing too much to get off balance. One of the biggest reasons why Kyle Shanahan has been able to establish this trust with Brock Purdy is first of all the time and how well Brock Purdy's played. But more so is what Brock Purdy does when the ball touches his hands. He's not freaked out and making erratic decisions. Rather, Kyle Shanahan can understand what he sees on the field and what plays he's going to. Last game, Kyle Shanahan said the only miss he really had was to Brandon Ayuk, and even Brock Purdy later said the same exact thing. That really shows that Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy see the field in the same way. Purdy also is able to take Kyle Shanahan's tough coaching. His dad was a pro athlete, and Purdy understands what it means to be coached that way. Speaking about Purdy's understanding, he understands his limitations, but also his role within the offense as being the point guard. And so far this season, he's been able to distribute the ball effectively to his playmakers, making them happy, I'm sure. This last game, he got Kyle Juszczyk involved in the passing game, and as we know, Kyle Juszczyk says that's really what he enjoys doing. So throwing him a touchdown pass is a good way to build up some chemistry and repertoire with him. But furthermore, throwing 3 touchdown passes with George Kittle really highlights his chemistry. But that can happen any week and any player with Brock Purdy. He connects with Juwan Jennings, Ronnie Bell, really throw out a name with him, and Brock Purdy probably will be able to find him in the pattern. Ultimately, this is just a nightmare for NFL defenses. You're thinking, okay, Brock Purdy loves to target Brandon Ayuk week 1, week 2, then he's targeting George Kittle, and the next Deebo Samuel, and the next Christian McCaffrey has a 4-touchdown game. It is truly a nightmare to deal with San Francisco's offense, and even so-called their backup players like Ronnie Bell and Jordan Mason could feasibly start on the law of teams. But just because Brock Purdy is surrounded by a ton of talented players doesn't mean that he's not a talented one too, and perhaps an elite quarterback. But these are just my thoughts on Brock Purdy and San Francisco's start of the season, their win over the Cowboys, and I'd like to hear your thoughts down below. It would also mean a ton to me if you liked and subscribed. And as always, I hope you guys have a good rest of your day.